You know, that actually wasn't a song. That's just something me and a couple of my buddies, we are playing around for a couple of years now with trying to figure out how to make an electronic music, after being strictly rock musicians for 20 years. The funny thing, however, is it's already copyright protected. And incidentally, this presentation is also copyright protected. And I see, yeah, you're tweeting. Did you like the song? Yeah? Perfect. So, did you know that your tweet is also copyright protected? No? We live in an age of information, and the amount of information is staggering around us. So, each second, 6,000 tweets are posted. Each second, 21,000 photos are uploaded. And each second, 5 hours of video are uploaded on YouTube. And guess what? It's all copyright protected. You might not be even aware that all your Facebook messages and tweets and Instagram photos, they're all copyright protected, and we are all copyright holders now. Yes, me and you and you and you, all of us. And as Eric Schmidt from Google said, did you know that each 2 days we now create as much information as we created from the very dawn of civilization to 2003. So there we have it. You would probably like to ask me, does copyright work for me? Well, you know, kind of. I mean, I've been playing music for 20 years and I really like to get some money for all this effort. You know, music is actually a terribly expensive thing to do. Last year, it was 60 euro what I got from our local licensing society, and well, you might think it's not that much, but I think it's quite decent, taking into account that I have less than 100 songs registered, and none of them is exactly what you would call a radio hit. So, yeah, who knows, maybe if I would actually make some effort, and I would become rich as one of those guys. Well, maybe not that rich, but at least well off. So, yeah, it kind of works for me. That doesn't, however, mean that I like copyright. I like when things make sense, and copyright too often doesn't. You know, the strange thing about the song which I just played is I haven't licensed it with our collecting society yet, but the organizers of this fine event will still have to pay for playing it. And not to me, no, not to me, to the licensing society. Just because I cannot grant this right to myself. I cannot just say, no, 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 don't worry, it's fine, I don't need any money, I like the event, play it for free. No, they can't. It's collective licensing. And even if it was a gig organized by me, by my band, we would still have to get the license to play our own music and pay for it, of course. So this is just one of the many oddities of copyright. And, you know, I'm a librarian. I work in this wonderful building. And librarians are actually dealing with copyright way more often than you would think. Just today, a bit earlier, a colleague of mine asked, can we make a photocopy out of the only copy we have of the musical score? I said, no, sorry, we can't. It's not allowed. You would break the law. And that's what librarians are doing every day. So this, for example, is a list of newest books in other library. These are the new books which library has on its shelves. They are advertising them to their readers. And by doing this, they are routinely breaking the copyright law, because they haven't acquired permission from publishers to do that. And in fact, I just broke the law as well, because I haven't either. Luckily, publishers understand that this is a free advertisement for their books. Or let's take another example. Imagine that you're a researcher. You live in Germany and you need an article, scientific article, which is somewhere in the United States in the digital form. So what will happen is the article will be printed out on paper, then faxed to you. Remember those machines? FAX, fax. And then on the other end, the researcher will then scan in the article into his computer for reading. And this is all just because sending an article as an attachment would be a copyright violation. Well, it probably might seem silly to you, but I personally think it's outrageous that libraries cannot really do their job anymore without risking becoming criminals. Well, I could talk about the weirdness of copyright all day, but that would be beside the point. I'm not here to prove that copyright is silly, and I believe that copyright is here for a reason. It's a perfectly valid business model for content industries. That doesn't mean I'm a supporter of Pirate Party, no way. And I don't agree that all the content should be made out available there for everyone. I think it's not very well adapted for 21st century. I think it's become too complex over time. It often defies any logic whatsoever. It creates all kinds of those strange artifacts. So how did we end up with this mess? Let's look back in the history a bit. In 1695, the license which granted Stationers' Company, the UK Printers Guild, was abolished. So, of course, printers were unhappy. They lobbied the government. They said, well, you know, the field of printing is unprotected now. We have to be protected from unfair competition. But the government somehow didn't buy this argument. So they came up with another idea, which was really, really clever. Let's argue that authors and their rights should be protected instead. So government did like this argument. So in 1710, Statute of Anne, first copyright act in the world, was passed, which granted authors a protection from unlawful copying of their works for 40 years after the publication of work. Not creation, publication. But there was a simple catch. This right was made transferable, which means authors, of course, they couldn't print their works themselves. They still needed printers. And the printers thought, well, if they need us, well, probably this new right will end up with us anyway. And they were right, it did. So, in theory, authors now had this new fancy right. But in fact, it was business as usual for printers, only without privilege to burn books. Fast forward to 19th century. Copyright is more or less accepted all over the place, but it's not global yet. And which means that Charles Dickens is pirated in the United States, and in turn, Mark Twain is pirated in the UK. So it only made sense when in 1886, Berne Convention was passed, which established an international framework for copyright and put the cornerstones of modern copyright, a lot of basic principles like the length of copyright, which you all know is 50 years minimum after the death of author. But in my mind, two most important principles it put in place were this: everything is protected. All creative works are protected regardless of their value. And the second is works are protected from the moment of their creation. And even more, it's strictly prohibited that there are any formalities, such as registration of copyright. So, which leads us to this situation now. See, I just created a copyright-protected work. It didn't exist 10 seconds ago. Now it's there, and it's protected. It reads, "Wind turns the pages, my only reader, for long 70 years." Well, I'll be the first to admit that it's not a proper poetry anyway. But it's still protected. You have to deal with it. On one hand, we have all this content which is professionally created, which has some certain cultural and economic value. On the other hand, we have all this huge mass of so-called user-generated content. And they are both protected by the same set of rigid rules. Of course, it doesn't mean, I'm not saying that they are equal. You probably wouldn't watch hours and hours and hours and hours of YouTube videos instead of latest Hollywood blockbuster. But anyway, they are protected all the same. So, what do we do now? I say, why don't we change things around? Why don't we protect only those things which have to be protected? Why don't we throw out the Berne Convention out of the window and say, let's protect what's have to be protected, and then protect with all the possible vigor? And why, for example, we don't make a giant registry of all the protected works, and together with a really easy-to-use licensing system? And why not protect things only for a time when they are actually commercially useful? After all, it seems to be working quite well for patents, so why not copyright? Apart from moral rights, protecting authority, integrity of works, of course, copyright is here to earn money for authors. And it's fine with me. I actually agree that those strange people who have become professional artists, unlike me, and who have not elected to come to office each day from 9 to 5, that they have the right to earn the living the way they have chosen from their creativity. And apparently, copyright somehow guarantees it, because that's the argument we have been hearing since the times when Stationer's company was lobbying for copyright law, that the authors without copyright would starve to death, that no new works would be created, ever. Well, I might not be the best example. I'm just a hobby musician, so I like doing things. I love creating music. And even if I don't become a professional musician, I will be still doing that. But going back to the argument, is really copyright the only tool to enable this? Of course, we all know that internet has turned things around. There is a totally new way to distribute and consume cultural content. But more importantly, it also enables artists' new way to get funded. And this is Amanda Palmer, my personal hero, brilliant musician. And she is a poster child of Kickstarter. She raised over 1 million euros for her album. And now she is using a platform called Patreon, which is kind of a subscription service to everything you create. And she has more than almost 5,000 patrons, which gives her almost $32,000 per thing. And in her TED talk, she has a brilliant quote. The question is not how do we make people pay for music, it's how do we let people pay for music. Then there are more fundamental proposals, like the artistic freedom voucher, which is proposed by Dean Beaker, which says that each US taxpayer, if he would divide 100 of his tax money to the creative persons, that would create, for 500,000 authors, $40,000 a year, which would in total be $20 billion, which is actually more than the copyright is producing now. Then there is, in Germany, widely discussed proposal of cultural flat rate, which basically is a levy on internet use, which then is diverted to the authors. Well, you probably might argue that there is too much at stake to risk and to try out those models, because we risk of collapsing entire industries. You know what comes to my mind? Slavery. Slavery was centuries-old establishment, widely accepted, pretty normal. And when the abolishment movement began, apart from the reason you might think of, which is human rights, one of the main arguments was that slavery was no longer economically feasible, that it just didn't work in an age of modern free market capitalism. So, you know what happened. The slavery was abolished, and the US economy somehow didn't collapse with it. So I say, the same might be true for copyright. I think we can actually do without it. I think we can find better ways to support artists, which at the same time would be really friendly for users and for society as well. And unfortunately, I'm not brilliant enough to offer you some nice solutions. Well, apart from the really silly idea that maybe we could just register all our tweets and Instagram photos with collecting societies, which would just choke them to death, and wouldn't that be small and brilliant? Yeah? But I say, let's dream. Let's dream up a better future for us. Let's stop talking how can we fix or modernize or reform copyright. I say, let's start thinking how we can build a new system, which would be fair to anyone, which would make more sense, which would be equally fair to authors and society. And don't be afraid that it might actually be impossible. Let's just start doing something. Because as one of my favorite authors, Sir Terry Pratchett, said, there is not a way things should be. There is just what happens and what we do. Let's do. Thank you.